Alright, what's going on, ladies and gentlemen? My name is Nick, and it's time for another episode of Should You Buy It? A very casual review of recently completed games that I have played on the channel, and in today's video we're going to be checking out Watch Dogs 2, a sequel to a game that came out a couple years ago that kind of failed to take the world by storm. Kind of like, I would pretty much relate it to the same way how the original Assassin's Creed came out. It came out and there was a lot of hype building up to it, and when it was finally released it kind of basically was pretty much, I would say, average at best. And the series took a really big jump when Assassin's Creed 2 came out. But I wouldn't say that the jump from Watch Dogs 1 to Watch Dogs 2 was nearly as big as the jump from Assassin's Creed 1 to Assassin's Creed 2. But it's still a pretty solid game, and I will let you guys know with the rest of the view what my final thoughts are. So let's talk about the story of Watch Dogs 2, because the story is my personal favorite thing to talk about. And the story in Watch Dogs 2, for a lack of a better word, is okay. Just okay. So let's talk about who would like it and who will not like it, beginning with who will not like it. So the people who will not like this story is people who want super serious narrative with a strong supporting cast of characters and strong lead and a definitive beginning, middle, climax, and eventually an ending. You will absolutely not dig the story in this game at all. The story of Watch Dogs 2 is built primarily on satire and pop culture. In fact, it references a lot of pop culture things that have happened in the real world a bunch of times. And basically, they're just a hack group that is looking out for the best interest of the public, finding that there's a corporation called Bloom out there that just seems to have a little bit too much access to information. In fact, Bloom is actually selling their information to other people such as insurance companies, government facilities, and basically they're kind of pulling a wool over the public's eye. And basically Marcus and his group, their job is to try to expose Bloom as much as they possibly can, and that's pretty much it. You spend the majority of the time going through missions that sometimes feel like they're connected and sometimes they don't feel that they're connected, but that may be for the best part of the game, because when the missions aren't too connected, it allows the gameplay to kind of explore interesting and dynamic gameplay elements that may or may not have been accessible if you tried to follow this very strict narrative. So yeah, it's kind of a take it or leave it. It's just okay. Like I said previously, it does have its moments at some points. Unfortunately, the game, by the end of it, when the gameplay the narrative is actually starting to kind of hit its peak with you trying to interact with a bunch of the other characters, the game kind of just ends and you're kind of left wanting a little bit more out of the story. So yeah, it's kind of take it or leave it, depending on basically the person that you are. So moving on into the gameplay of Watch Dogs 2. So as an open world game, it does all the open world things that you would expect fairly well. The vehicles are present, the driving, the shooting, the stealth. My only critique is that there's really nothing exceptional in terms of the gameplay that really separates it. It makes it a good game to a great game. So you spend the majority of the time playing as Marcus Holloway, and you follow a fairly linear mission structure where you're visiting, in most cases, a pre-existing building that is in San Francisco that has been kind of just retrofitted in terms of its name to suit the story. And you have the options, as always, to progress through the mission structure, either using your bots, which is by far the most efficient way. So either using the RC car or the paired drone, and kind of just getting your lay of the land for what you need to hack, what you need to access. And in some cases, though, Marcus will have to go hands-on and actually go into the building himself. But for, I would say, 80% of the missions, you can just accomplish them using your drones and your robots to your advantage. At the same time, the game does give you the ability to just allow Marcus to go in physically himself. And it does give you the adequate skill tree to shape your Marcus Holloway into that specific character who is more hands-on. But by far the most effective way is just using your drones throughout the majority of the game. And I would have to say by the halfway point of the game, this almost gets a little bit tiring at times, just sending in your drones. And Although yes, you can send in Marcus yourself, you just know as a gamer that the most efficient way is just to use your robots. And I would say there were really one too many light puzzles to solve. So throughout the game, you encounter these invisible circuits that you kind of have to basically just use a rudimentary puzzle system where you flip the puzzle to connect the circuit and eventually chain into a much larger puzzle that you need to complete. It was cool for the first couple times, but by the end of the game, you kind of just dreaded and almost predictably saw them coming, and you almost just thought to yourself, I really don't want to do this. So that's probably my biggest gripe so far about the gameplay, is just the puzzle sequences. And as well, I found that the detective mode pseudo eagle vision was a little bit too distracting. So throughout the entire game, you have access to use your hacker vision that gives you and highlights objects in the area that you can interact with. It is usable by both Marcus and his drones. I would have liked them to tone it down a tiny bit more than what they did in early. They did tone it down based on feedback from an earlier build, but I would have still liked it to have been toned down a little bit more, just because the world that they've created is just so beautiful. It's done exceptionally well, and you are half tempted the entire time just to stay in that hacker mode, which really does take away from the gameplay, in my opinion. So I got to play the majority of this game on the PlayStation 4 console version of the game, and I would have to say, as an open world game, and let me emphasize this once again, as an open world game, this is definitely one of the better looking games that I've ever played. It does not have the scale or level of detail as I would say a Grand Theft Auto 5, but that is just the exception rather than the rule. It's still done and executed very well. Ubisoft always does an amazing job of recreating the cities that they're trying to portray in their cities. They just do the research. They've done this since the Assassin's Creed days, and they nail almost every single detail of a city, which, if you think about it, in a city that is in a game that's set in the modern times, that's extremely difficult to do if you just think about the amount of buildings and structures that are in a modern day city, and they just absolutely nail it. If you actually live in San Francisco, I could just imagine you just have a fantastic time playing this game. I personally myself have been to like San Francisco like 6 times within the last year, and while I was playing, I was like, I know there. I was there catching Pokemon, or that's the Oakland Bridge. That's Chinatown. Those are the arches. It's just an amazing feeling driving around throughout the game and just encountering places that you've been to physically yourself. And I can only imagine what it's like if you actually lived in San Francisco. So they absolutely nail the environments, the structures, the textures are always very high polygon count. It maintains a consistent frame rate, and yeah, just the environment is done extremely well. In terms of character designs, it's really up and down. Some characters are very distinctive, such as Wrench or the returning T-Bone or Raymond Kenny. And even Marcus Holloway, his character is done extremely well in terms of voice acting, facial animations. But you also have your bland characters that really don't stand out that well, such as Sitara or Horatio, and even the main protagonist or antagonist, Doosan. You don't really get much screen time with him, and from what you gather, you don't really develop that much of either a hate or disdain for him. He's kind of just a random corporate dude, and I think that's something that should be addressed a little bit earlier. Just trying to create, I said this a little bit earlier, by the time you reach the end of the game, you're starting to kind of finally get a feel of what all the characters are like and starting to try to build that connection to them, even the antagonist or the bad guy. And by that time, the game kind of just ends and you're kind of just like wanting a little bit more. Alright, so closing thoughts. So I always offer a very cut and dry opinion at the very end of my reviews of who should buy this game and who should not buy this game. So the people who should not buy Watch Dogs 2 are the people who are seeking this very in-depth, engaging, and very flushed out narrative. You're not going to find that in Watch Dogs 2 at all. Most of the narrative is driven by just banter between Marcus and his hacker friends, which primarily is built upon pop culture and satire. So if you're not a person who likes those two elements, then this game story will definitely not be for you. And as well, if you're a person that was seeking a game with very new and innovative gameplay elements, this game will not be for you either. In terms of people who should buy Watch Dogs 2, if you're just a person looking for a very fun open world game that doesn't really take itself too seriously, but still maintains a certain level of realism to it, and which narrative is pretty much built on memes and satire and pop culture, then this game will be built perfectly for you. And even though none of the core gameplay elements are exceptional than anything different that you would find in most open world games these days, it does execute them fairly well and just looks great, looks fun, it's fun to play. So yeah, that's pretty much it. That's my review of Watch Dogs 2. Let me know what you guys saw of the game, what you guys saw of the series. But on that, thank you guys for watching, and I will see you guys next time for whatever review or gameplay I am doing next.